Kicking us off at number 5, we have the St. Louis Cemetery number 1. The first of 3 Roman Catholic cemeteries in New Orleans, this is a legendary site for ghost spotting, although you'll need a vetted tour guide to get in. Break this rule and who knows what kind of curse you'll incur. The cemetery is full of above ground tombs, which some refer to as cities of the dead. These vaults are largely from the 18th and 19th centuries, although some of the graves date back to early 1700s. Of course, with all sorts of above ground burials, one would expect to see plenty of ghosts here. Visitors claim to see manifestations of ghosts walking around, and an abundance of amateur photographers claim to have captured ghost orbs on film. Digital too. Some ghosts are more famous than others, but at the St. Louis Cemetery number 1, none are as well renowned as Mary Laveau. The voodoo queen of New Orleans, Laveau made a name for herself through fortune telling, occult studies, and herbal medicines. These days, gawkers claim to see her floating through the cemetery where she's buried, wearing her signature bright colored clothing and white turban. Guests have reported being scratched, pinched, shoved, or even coming down with sudden unexplainable illnesses after seeing her ghost. For many years, followers of the occult would visit her tomb and mark it with 3 X's, but this led to more severe vandalism and it has been refurbished since. Laveau isn't the only ghost to roam the graves, but she is definitely the most well known. Just watch your back if you choose to visit and stick with the tour guide. Next up at number 4, the Hanging Jail. The Gothic Jail of De Ridder was built in 1915. Anything Gothic has a higher chance of being haunted, it's just how architecture works. That's why the Notre Dame is so full of ghosts. That and the whole Claude Frollo situation. Spirit appreciators in the know believe that the jail is haunted by 2 men hung for the slaying of a taxi driver. Joe Genna and Moulton Brasseau hired a taxi driver late one night and told him to drive. For reasons still up in the air, they killed him. Not knowing what to do with the body, the 2 men dumped it in the old Pickering Mill pond and ran off into the night. Maybe they drove off. I wonder if they took the cab. The body was found and traced back to the 2 would-be on-the-run murderers, and such they were convicted and then hung from the 3rd floor gallows. The interesting thing about the gallows though is that a spiral staircase circles around the noose. So there's a vertigo-inducing set of stairs surrounding the ominously hanging noose. Definitely a ghost creator if I've ever seen one. In addition to this lovely feature, there's also an underground tunnel connecting the jail to the next door courthouse. That is a tunnel you would not want to find yourself in after hours. Who knows what kind of crooked-necked wailing ghosts you find down there. Of course, there are plenty of people who claim to have captured photos of the ill-fated duo along with many other unlucky lawbreakers. Just remember kids, if you want to be a ghost, constantly do things that you'll regret. That way, you'll have all sorts of reasons to stick around for the afterlife. Coming in at number 3, we have the Dauphine Orleans Hotel. What was once a bordello is now a very popular hotel and bar. Jilted lovers, recovering soldiers, mistreated women, they all have a chance to haunt this New Orleans landmark. Of all the stories, there are 4 that tend to come up no matter who you ask. The first is that of a lost bride, thought to be the spirit of a young woman named Millie. She was working for the bar as a courtesan when she met a dapper young man and they decided to get married. However, on the morning of the wedding, Millie's groom-to-be was shot dead in a gambling dispute. Distraught, Millie waited for days for her fiancé to show up and never took her wedding dress off. For years, she would wear the white dress around the bar, hoping that someday he would show up. Now her ghost wanders the hotel in her dress, waiting for her love. Another classic story is that of the dancing girl. A young teen has been seen dancing around in the ballroom. Many a drunk guest has claimed that a young girl helped them to their room, all the while dancing as if she were floating on air. There's also the tale of the rebel, a ghost dressed in a dark Confederate uniform. While no battles took place in New Orleans, plenty of wounded soldiers would end up in the city for rest and recovery, and maybe a little bit of time at the bordello. This ghost has been seen pacing the outer courtyard, earning the nickname the Worried General. And of course, the bar itself, known as May's Place, is full to the brim with ghosts. Employees claim to have seen all sorts of unexplainable stuff, from glasses falling down from high shelves to locked doors opening up on their own to brochures swirling around like fall leaves. If you're looking for a haunted overnight stay, the Dauphine Orleans is probably your best bet. Don't go paying any of the ghosts for services though, you probably won't get what you're expecting. Coming in at number 2, Myrtle's Plantation. Built in the late 1700s, this is considered by some to be one of America's most haunted homes. Made extra legendary by the multiple photographs taken featuring ghosts, you'd be hard-pressed to find an ectoplasm enthusiast who hasn't heard of young Chloe. Chloe was a young slave punished for eavesdropping on the family. She took her revenge later on in the form of a poisoned birthday cake. It was served up to the owners of the house, and within 3 hours, 3 people were dead. Apparently that wasn't enough revenge for one lifetime though, as Chloe is still said to haunt the plantation. 2 different pictures have been taken with apparent ghostly qualities to them. One is a photo of the facade of the house, and if you look carefully in the corner, a ghostly visage can be seen. Another is of 2 tourists taking a selfie in front of a window, and Chloe can be seen peering out from in front of the curtains. While famous, some folks claim that they could be doctored. What do you think? After the Chloe incident, many later owners suffered death and murder tragedies while living at the house. Their ghosts have also been seen roaming the grounds. These days, most of the scary stuff is directly ghost related, so I don't know if it's still dangerous or just a spooky tourist attraction. Maybe the spirits like the attention they're getting from the public and would rather not kill anyone else. And finally at number 1, the Lalaurie Mansion. Back in the 1830s, the Lalaurie family was extremely well-to-do, especially Delphine Lalaurie. She was a well-respected member of society and known for throwing lavish parties. All was well and everyone had their fun until disaster struck. A fire swept through the building, burning much of it to the ground. Among the rubble, firefighters found the bodies of chained and tortured slaves in a hidden chamber. It appears that Delphine would perform unnecessary surgery on these poor helpless folks too. By the time all this was figured out, the Lalauries had fled the country, never to be seen again. With no way for justice to be served, the souls of the people held here remained, looking for revenge. Pretty much all future owners of the property quickly left after moving in. The ghosts haunting the walls are pretty aggressive too, with many people reporting bizarre physical assaults by forces unseen. Today, ghost hunters say that it's the most haunted house in the French Quarter. Historians dispute this, but that's not going to stop the Phantom fans from traveling to the haunted mansion.
Coming in at number 5, Hill of Crosses in Lithuania. Located in Lithuania, the Hill of Crosses is a site of pilgrimage about 12 kilometers north of the city of Cholet. Now, the precise origin of the crosses is unknown, but it is believed that the first crosses were placed on the former Damonte Hill fort after the 1831 uprising. The uprising was of course known as the Polish-Russian War and was an armed rebellion in the heartland of partitioned Poland against the Russian Empire. Ever since then, not only crosses and crucifixes but also statues of the Virgin Mary have appeared on the Hill of Crosses, as well as carvings of Lithuanian patriots, and thousands upon thousands of tiny effigies and rosaries have been brought here by Catholic pilgrims. Now, as you would expect, the exact number of all these items is unknown, but it is estimated to range between 50,000 to 100,000. Over the years, the place has come to signify the peaceful endurance of Lithuanian Catholicism, despite the threats it faced throughout history. Throughout history, the Hill of Crosses has been used as a place for Lithuanians to pray for peace for their country and for the loved ones they had lost during the wars of independence. The hill eventually became a place of defiance once again during Soviet occupation from 1944 to 1991. The hill and crosses were bulldozed by Soviets 3 times, but locals kept rebuilding it. So sweet. In at number 4, Myrtles Plantation, USA. The Myrtles Plantation is a historic home and former antebellum plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Built in 1976, it is considered to be one of America's most haunted homes, with a variety of legends surrounding the plantation. Now, one of the reasons Myrtles is believed to be so damn haunted is because it is rumored to be on top of an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground. As of right now, it is currently a bed and breakfast and offers historical and mystery tours. As I previously mentioned though, it is considered to be one of the most haunted homes in the United States, with it rumored to be home to at least 12 ghosts, and is often reported that 10 murders occurred in the house, but historical records only indicate the murder of 1, William Winter. William Drew Winter is also a very popular character in the plantation. He was an attorney who lived in the home before being shot by a stranger. It has been said that after he was shot, he staggered inside the home and died trying to climb the stairs. He died on the 17th step. Even today, visitors still claim to hear his dying footsteps. Coming in at number 3, Battleship Island, Nagasaki, Japan. Also known as Hashima Island, this is the abandoned island nearby the city of Nagasaki in southern Japan, and is one of 505 uninhabited islands in Nagasaki Prefecture. In the 1950s, it was a bustling place, home to thousands of coal mine workers and families. However, ever since the coal mine shut down in 1974, it has remained abandoned. As petroleum replaced coal in Japan in the 1960s, coal mines began to close across the country, with Mitsubishi officially closing the mine in January 1974, and the island was completely cleared by April of the same year. Today, its most notable features are the abandoned and still mostly intact apartment buildings, the surrounding sea walls, and its distinctive profile shape. In 2009, Japan requested to include Hashima Island along with 22 other industrial sites in the UNESCO World Heritage Site list, which was initially opposed by South Korean authorities on the grounds that Korean and Chinese forced laborers were used on the island prior and during World War II. Although Hashima was entirely closed off until 2009, travelers are now allowed to visit, with it being recognized by UNESCO in 2015. You may also recognize the site from the big screen, with it serving as the secret headquarters of Bond villain Raoul Silver in the 2012 movie Skyfall. In at 2, Lizzie Borden's house, Fall River, Massachusetts. Now, for those who don't know, the Lizzie Borden house is where Lizzie Borden and her family lived, and is located on 230 2nd Street in the city of Fall River, Massachusetts. Born Lizzie Andrew Borden, sucks for her, she was an American woman who was the main suspect in the August 4th, 1892 axe murders of her father and stepmother. However, Borden was tried and ultimately acquitted of the murders. The case received widespread newspaper coverage throughout the United States, and following her release from jail, where she was held during the trial, Borden chose to remain in the house her parents had been killed in, despite being ostracized by her other residents. Now, because the Commonwealth of Massachusetts elected to not charge anyone with the murder that occurred over 127 years ago, a ton of speculation about the crimes have continued on. Now, Lizzie spent the rest of her life in the home up until her death at age 66, just days before the death of her sister Emma. The house has been operated as a bed and breakfast since 1996 under the ownership of Martha McGinn, who inherited the home. According to Martha McGinn, the room where Lizzie's stepmother Abby Borden was found murdered is the most requested room at the bed and breakfast. Guests who stay, not just in Abby's room but in the home as a whole, have reported all manners of strange sightings in the home. Would you dare stay there? I would. I'd stay in every room. And finally, coming in at number 1, Chernobyl, Pripyat, Ukraine. Pripyat is a ghost city in northern Ukraine named after the nearby Pripyat River, and was founded on February 4th, 1970 as the 9th nuclear city in the Soviet Union to serve the nearby Chernobyl nuclear power plant. The city was officially proclaimed in 1979 and had grown to a population of 49,360 by the time it was evacuated on April 27th, 1986, the day after the Chernobyl disaster. Now, the Chernobyl disaster was a nuclear disaster which occurred on April 26, 1986 at the nuclear power plant not far from Pripyat, and was considered to be the worst nuclear disaster in history, and is also one of the only 2 nuclear energy disasters rated at 7, the maximum severity on the International Nuclear Event Scale, the other being the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in Japan. Ever since the nuclear disaster in Pripyat, the city has remained entirely uninhabited since the evacuation, although the buildings, furniture and all other signs of life are exactly where the former citizens left them. It is a city frozen in time, plates still out, dolls left on beds, and even a haunting fairground ride waiting to be used. Weathered books can be found in classrooms, and abandoned photographs are still hanging on walls in their original frames. There are strict rules regarding the site considering the sheer amount of radiation in the area. However, following the airing of HBO's Chernobyl series, Ukraine's government have announced that the site will become an official tourist attraction. Will you be checking it out? I personally don't want to die, so I won't.
Starting off at number 5, we have Nagoro, Japan. If you were to travel out to this sleepy valley village in remote Japan, you might see a lot of elderly folks working the land, putting up signposts, playing with children. However, your eyes would be playing tricks on you. A majority of the hundreds of Nagoro residents are actually creepy human-sized dolls. They are everywhere. They fill the schoolhouse, they toil in the fields, they hang out in the town. You know, you're pretty likely to wave hello at one before realizing you've just extended a friendly greeting to a scarecrow. The town had around 300 human residents at one point, but as is the case in a lot of Japanese villages, the population has dwindled. Young people have left for better jobs in bigger cities, and many of the elderly residents have passed away. These days, there are only about 30 people living in the village. If these dolls ever gained sentience, I'd say it would be over for the humans in Nagaro. So you might be wondering where the dolls come from. They couldn't have just appeared one day, could they? Lucky for us, they do have a rational creator. Tsukimi Ayano makes the dolls, and recently she's started inviting people to workshops to make even more. Ayano moved back to Nagaro after living in Osaka for most of her life. The first doll she ever made was actually supposed to be a scarecrow to keep birds away from her house. The original was modeled after her dad, and soon after she was making similar figures and images of all sorts of villagers. It's an interesting memorial project, filling up an empty village with dolls who look like deceased residents. Maybe someday the spirits will return to their vessels and live in the village as they did when they were alive. Imagine a village of living dolls. Yikes. I can only imagine what it would be like at night. Dolls moving in and out of your peripheral vision as you hear children singing by the schoolyard. Off in the distance, a hammer echoes through the valleys. You hear muffled shuffling behind you. The dolls are tired of being made of straw and paper. They want a real human body again. I'll never look at a scarecrow the same way. Up next at number 4, we have the Belitz Heilstatten Hospital. Abandoned buildings are usually bad news at night. Nothing good could ever come from visiting a crumbling edifice during the witching hour. You never know who or what could be lurking. Abandoned hospitals are even worse news, considering all of the death, pain, and suffering that have transpired within. And this abandoned hospital in particular had a whole host of reasons not to visit at night. The Belitz Heilstatten has a long history behind its haunting. Way back in 1898, it was used as a sanatorium for lung diseases, tuberculosis and the like. As it housed those poor breathing impaired Germans, I am certain it saw its fair share of suffering and death. Medical science has come a long way, but back then, tuberculosis was pretty much a painful death sentence. A lot of this would have happened before the iron lung was invented in the 1920s too, so it's not looking too good for these patients. So now we have an old sanatorium full of ghosts with bad lungs. What else? Soon it became a field hospital for treating German casualties during the First World War. This was around the time that machine guns and mustard gas were first being used, so I would imagine it was quite gruesome. Now we've got soldiers both young and old, both going into the Belitz. At one point it even housed a young injured Adolf Hitler, blinded by gas and wounded in the leg. Then in 1945, the Russians occupied it during World War II, taking it as a field hospital once again. So we have lung patient ghosts, German soldier ghosts, Russian soldier ghosts. That's a pretty wild mix of spirits. No, not that kind of Russian spirit. Nowadays, the complex is shut down and the elements have started to take over. The forest is creeping in and it has become dilapidated as hell. They give tours of some of the main areas with a canopy pathway, which, it's kind of lame. But don't worry, they've hidden the good stuff from the public. An intrepid adventurer could sneak past the barricades and potentially run into some of the phantoms in the crumbling hallways. But I would never suggest that to you. That would be illegal. Number 2, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. This West Virginian manor opened with only the best of intentions. Thomas Story Kirkbride was a doctor and crusader for the mentally ill who founded the American Psychiatric Association. His goal was to treat asylum patients in a more humane way for better results. He built the asylum to offer the patients more freedom, light, and fresh air. And if everything went to plan, it would have been wonderful. However, after being built, mental health illnesses were diagnosed more often, and there were major stigmas surrounding this. As such, the asylum was totally overpopulated. 5 patients in every 1 patient bedroom. Malnourishment on a wide scale. These factors exacerbated the mental illnesses that the patients already had. By 1938, the asylum was 6 times over capacity, with patients running wild and orderlies unable to stay in control. At its peak, the 300-person facility was holding 2,600 patients. That means that patients were sleeping on floors and freezing rooms. The windows were filthy, the walls disintegrating. Many patients were being locked in cages, and the more unruly ones were being lobotomized through Walter Freeman's ice pick method. That's when they take an ice pick shaped instrument and push it through your eye socket to disconnect the frontal lobe, and it renders you functional but totally zombie-like. By the time the asylum closed, the only wing that was expanded was the graveyard. Those poor patients. Tours are given in the main parts of the asylum, and many ghost hunters claim to feel the presence of the hundreds who died in awful conditions. There are many ghost stories abound, including ones about a little girl who was born and lived in the asylum and a mysterious woman floating through the kitchen. It has been said that if you are in the right room at the right time of night, you can hear the shouts and hollers of patients from years gone by. And finally, at number 1, the Catacombs of Paris. If you didn't already know, there are kilometers of limestone passageways underneath Paris, filled to the brim with human remains. After the city's graveyards overflowed, allowing corpses to spill into the streets, a military officer decided that piling all the excess bodies and remains down in the limestone tunnels was a good idea. So now we have underground passages lovingly decorated with the bones of Parisian ancestors. How fun. Being around human remains at night is already pretty scary, and being in dark tunnels full of them cannot be too fun. But there are way more scary stories about the catacombs than one would expect. About 2 kilometers are open to the public on a regular day, but beyond the state-sanctioned skeletons, there is so much more to explore. It is very easy to get lost among the tunnels and pits and bones, and many people actually have done just that. In 2017, a couple teenagers were lost for 3 days, and they were found suffering from hypothermia. Even scarier is the famous uncovered video camera story. In the early 90s, a group of catacomb explorers found a beat-up old video camera. There was footage still inside the camera of a man who was very clearly lost and alone in the catacombs. He seemed to be going mad trying to find his way out of the massive network by the light of his camera. It ends with him dropping the camera on the ground, and to this day nobody knows what happened to him. Poor guy should have brought a map. Some say the horror movie As Above, So Below was inspired by this event. There are so many more stories of secret societies, mysterious voices, and underground swimming holes that would be enough to creep out the most cynical of thrill seekers. Maybe someday we can take a deeper dive into the horror that is the catacombs.
Number 5 on this list is the Myrtles Plantation. The Myrtles Plantation is located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and is home to a plethora of ghosts. The plantation was established in 1796 and is said to have been built on an ancient burial grounds. These burial grounds have obviously contributed to the deep spiritual presence that it has, and the reports that there are 12 different ghosts that currently occupy the space. However, the spirit that is most commonly seen wandering the place wasn't from these burial grounds at all, but an incident that occurred at the plantation many years ago. Chloe, a slave of the plantation in the early 1800s, was eavesdropping one day on a conversation between the family who owned the plantation. The punishment was swift and drastic, and they cut off one of Chloe's ears so that she would never do it again. Chloe obviously didn't take too kindly to this, and even though she knew it would most likely mean her death, wanted to retaliate. She did so by poisoning a birthday cake, which in turn killed 2 of the owner's daughters. For this, she was put to death and executed. However, it is said that Chloe's spirit still wanders the ground to this day and is the most commonly spotted ghost at this plantation. She will be wearing a turban to cover up her ear that was chopped off when she was alive. If you ever see this ghost, people say that you immediately get filled with a deep and solemn depression that hangs over you for quite some time. People speculate that the deep depression that you feel after encountering her may have been the way that she felt while she was alive. Number 4 on this list is the Whaley House. The Whaley House is located in San Diego, California, and is said by some to be the most haunted home in all of the United States. The ghost who haunts the home is not your standard phantom. In fact, it is the spirit of a convicted high-profile robber from the 1850s. Yankee Jim had a good run of thievery, but was inevitably unable to avoid the gallows and was hung off of the back of a wagon in 1852. Thomas Whaley was at that hanging and watched as Yankee Jim died. This did not deter him though from purchasing the very land where it happened. It was at this spot that he proceeded to build what is known today as the Whaley House. It didn't take very long at this home though before the Whaleys quickly realized the errors of their ways. It is said that it took only a few weeks of living there before they started to notice strange ongoings at the home. Doors would slam without anyone around them at all. They may even lock themselves as well with you inside. Footsteps could be heard moving around the home at all hours throughout the day. These footsteps were large, the sound of a big boot attacking the ground, the sound of Yankee Jim. In the entirety of that time the family owned the home for over 100 years, there was never a time that they said they weren't haunted in this house. After the home was donated and turned into a museum, the sightings became more exaggerated. Different phantoms started appearing, screams were heard, items would float from place to place. A parapsychologist even reported seeing a phantom dog run through the home at one point. Frankly, I don't believe all of these secondary claims. It kind of feels like people's imaginations ran with the idea of having a haunting once it turned into a museum. But I do believe the ghost of Yankee Jim to be a very real thing. If you do go to this home, make sure you have no valuables with you, or Yankee Jim may just claim them for himself. Number 3 on this list is Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. We just spoke about the most haunted home in America, so it's only fitting that we talk about the most haunted cemetery in America. The Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is located in Chicago, Illinois, and has potentially the widest array of ghost stories that I've ever heard of. It's not the biggest graveyard in the world. In fact, it doesn't even operate as one anymore. It was established in the 1840s and practically abandoned in the mid-1900s. There were rumors that the mafia used to use this place as a spot to dump bodies, as it's reasonably secluded and nobody could see them do it. Its secluded nature, rumors tied to the mafia, and the inevitable vandalism that it did receive could all be reasons why it's haunted today. Now, I was talking about the mafia and gangsters. Well, one of the biggest ghostly sightings at this cemetery is actually a gangster car. The graveyard is right next to a road, and people driving down that road have reported seeing the distinct image of a vehicle in the middle of the road resembling a mafia vehicle. People have actually fully swerved off of the road and crashed their own cars, and then later realized that nothing was there at all. Others have seen a whole farmhouse appear in the graveyard, but when they tried to go to it, it completely disappeared. Cars and farmhouses, these are big apparitions, and lead me to believe that the spiritual presence in this cemetery has got to be really strong. In 1991, the Chicago Sun released a very famous picture of the graveyard in which there appears to be the figure of a woman sitting on a gravestone, all in white. The photographer behind this picture claims that there wasn't anybody there when he took the picture, and it only came up on the camera. With over 100 ghostly sightings in this cemetery, I do believe that it's claimed to be the most haunted cemetery in America. It's well earned. Number 2 on this list is Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Waverly Hills Sanatorium is located in Louisville, Kentucky, and was home to thousands of deaths. At least 8,000 if we're really trying to be exact. The sanatorium was built in 1910, and the main patients that it dealt with were victims of the White Plague. Back then, there was no known cure, and many of the patients died to this disease. That wasn't the only way that they died here, though. It is believed that doctors would use these dying patients as guinea pigs for some drugs or treatments that they were developing. However, oftentimes, this would just result in the patient's death. After the White Plague had largely been dealt with, the space was transformed into a geriatric hospital. The liberties that the doctors and the nurses took, they got even worse when this happened. Electroshock therapy was utilized. Major injustices and mistreatments were done on the patients from the nurses. It really all went bad. In the 1980s, this spot was shut down for good, but by that point, the damage had already been done. Now Waverly Hills is one of the most haunted locations in America. People say that there are constant footsteps all over the place, even though there's hardly anyone in the building. Doors will slam and lock when no one's even close to them. Phantoms and shadows will stalk people throughout the hallways of the building, seemingly waiting for a moment to strike. Screams and shrieks of former patients can be heard ringing throughout the corridors of the building. Many ghosts haunt the death tunnel, which was a place where they used to move the bodies of the dead. In room 502, there have been reported attacks on people, where they have felt their bodies seize up and get thrown to the ground. In that room, 2 nurses committed suicide. Apparently one of them jumped out of the window and the other one hung themselves because they couldn't live with the ongoing death that happened in this place. This building has seen way too many horrible things in its existence to just be a building anymore. Feel free to look it up on the internet if you're interested, but don't go visit this in person. Number 1 on this list is the Eastern State Penitentiary. This prison is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and when you hear the types of things that went on at this place, it's no wonder that it's haunted as badly as it is. The facility was built in 1829 and was in service for roughly 150 years. Now, if this place had a motto, then it would have to be something about solitude. That was the theme at Eastern State Penitentiary: being alone. If you were a prisoner there, then you had your very own tiny little cell where you lived alone, ate alone, slept alone, and just existed alone. The thing is, it wasn't just the cell either. If you had to go to the washroom or leave the cell for any reason, then the guards would put a bag over your head and they would walk you to wherever you're going. The only thing that you will ever know if you go to this place is your cell. The mental strain that that amount of solitude would have had on those prisoners, it would have been insane. This wasn't the only form of punishment though. There were reports of chaining your tongue to your wrist and leaving you like that. They would dunk you in water and then they would hang you outside in the winter until your body literally froze. And honestly, there was a lot more horrible things that they did too that I don't even want to get into. Either way, due to all the horrors, due to all the death, due to all the atrocities that went on in these walls, the prison now boasts its fair share of ghosts. It is currently open to the public, however, I would not recommend going and checking it out. They have various cell blocks that are all known for different ghostly experiences. One of them has extreme echoing voices of laughter as if somebody was going insane. One of them has what it feels like evil shadowy figures jumping from wall to wall. The bloodthirst that these figures have is reportedly palpable. Another cell block has the visions of the dead faces that appear battered and bloodied right in front of you. Gary Johnson, who works to upkeep the prison, had a harrowing experience here before. He was opening up a cell block to clean it when all of a sudden his body stopped functioning, and he was completely paralyzed, but also totally aware. He felt as if spirits were invading his body and hurting his mind as he was frozen. Finally, he was released and ran from the scene. This prison is haunted to its core, and it must be avoided at all costs. Number 5 on this list is Tranquil Sanatorium in British Columbia. Tranquil Sanatorium has quite an extensive and tragic history to it, which has caused its walls to be the home to many undead spirits. A sanatorium, if you weren't familiar, is an establishment which has the sole purpose of housing those with long-term illnesses and is often associated with tuberculosis. The one that we're talking about right now is no different. It was built in 1907 as a facility to treat people with tuberculosis. However, it didn't stay like this for very long. The purpose of the facility eventually changed to become an insane asylum. It acted as this mental institute for a while until finally becoming abandoned in the late 1980s. Due to its deep history with death, disease, mental illness, it's no wonder that the Tranquil Sanatorium is now deeply haunted. The layout of this facility screams something out of a Stephen King book. It has several buildings that are connected by poorly lit underground tunnels. The building itself looks all too eerie from the outside as well, with dirty cream colored walls that have seen far better days as rot and mold slowly devour them. Visitors of this place report feeling extremely uneasy. A common note for most people that visit is the presence of orbs, strange balls of light that flutter throughout the building and then disappear. Some people have reported seeing a ghostly apparition on the 6th floor. This ghost takes the form of a woman not older than 30. She appears to be crying and screaming. The tunnels are said to be particularly haunted. People have reported screams coming from nowhere, flashes of movement, menacing and animalistic groans that make you feel as if somebody is right behind you. Children can also be heard playing every now and again in some of the more open areas of the building. Clearly, this place's dark history has impacted it greatly, and just because physical humans decided to abandon it in the 80s doesn't mean that it was truly abandoned for good. Number 4 on this list is the Firkins House. The Firkins House is part of Fort Edmonton Park, which, you guessed it, is located in Edmonton, Alberta. Fort Edmonton Park is a little tourist attraction that has buildings from 1885, 1905, and 1920 to represent the homes of the time. One of the houses is the Firkins House. This home is interesting because during my research, I couldn't find any particular evidence of wrongdoings or tragic events at this home. In fact, for the most part, it seems like a pretty normal house. People have lived there before and no harm has befell them, but it seems that after they moved out and the home was donated, that's when things started to go a little bit haywire. There are reportedly 3 ghosts or demons that haunt this home, each one scarier and more dangerous than the next. The first one is the ghost of a beautiful floating woman who is dressed in all white. People have said that they've spotted her in the windows of the home looking out at them or slowly drifting throughout the living room. The second one is the ghost of a little boy. The boy will appear to certain people looking extremely ill. It is currently unknown if this boy died reside in and around the area or what disease he is suffering from, but it is said that he resides in the home with the woman in white. The third being is by far the scariest of all three. A ventriloquist dummy that will appear in the home or in the cupboards. This thing can move all by itself and talk by itself. It is very similar to the popular horror franchise Chucky, and it's said by some to be seeking to harm the living. I'm not sure if the ghost of the ventriloquist has taken over this dummy or if the dummy has taken on its own persona, but I definitely do not want to go anywhere where the primary residence is a demon puppet. Number 3 on this list is the Five Fishermen Restaurant. This is a restaurant in Halifax, Nova Scotia, known for its exceptional oysters and also its ghostly inhabitants. The ground that this restaurant sits on wasn't always utilized for serving up fish and chips though. In fact, it has a very long history. In the early 1800s is when the building went up, and for a long time it acted as the town's only school. Nothing ghoulish or demonic about that. However, at around the turn of the century, the school moved and the building took on a new purpose. It became the mortuary for Halifax and made its dealings with the dead. Now, not every mortuary is going to become haunted, but this one had quite a lot to deal with over the years. In 1912, the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, sunk. It sunk roughly 640 kilometers off of the eastern shores of Canada, and therefore the closest places to assist with the rescue was these eastern provinces. Halifax acted as the leader in these rescue processes, and because of that, the mortuary had an onslaught of bodies of people whom had died on the ship. 5 years after that tragedy, Halifax incurred one of their own with the massive Halifax explosion. This was where a munitions ship exploded and it killed roughly 2,000 people just like that. This mortuary served as the primary designation for both of these incidents, and due to the unnatural deaths here, it makes sense that some spirits have clung on. Guests and employees alike have reported seeing ghosts all over this mortuary that turned restaurant. One of the dishwashers reported running out of the restaurant when he looked up from what he was doing and was staring directly at a ghost-like specter. The restaurant has attempted to have serious renovations done. However, I don't think that any amount of structural changes will get these spirits to rest for good. Number 2 on this list is the Frank Slide. Now, even though the Frank Slide sounds like it could be a fun, popular dance move that takes over TikTok for a few weeks, it is far more morbid than that. On April 29th in 1903, in the mining town of Frank, which at that time was part of the Northwest Territories, but it is now a section of Alberta, there was a horrible tragedy. 110 million tons of limestone and rock came tumbling down in one of Canada's biggest landslides ever. This fell onto part of the town of Frank. Frank was located right next to Turtle Mountain, which after extensive mining had grown unstable. On April 29th, it all came crashing down and claimed the lives of 70 to 90 people. It is still to this day Canada's most deadly landslide to ever occur in history, and was a horrible tragedy that can only remind us how fleeting life can be. I think the craziest part about this landslide as well is that it wasn't just miners who were killed. Their wives, their families, all of them died at the hands of the Frank Slide. The remains of these bodies were never recovered either, as the damage from the slide was far too devastating. Where all of this happened is now a section of a town called Crow's Nest Pass, and over a century later, the ghosts of the dead still haunt the area. This place is somewhere where visitors have reported feeling very unsafe. They say that the overall feelings of uneasiness are almost too much to bear and that they have to leave. Cries, howls, screams, this can all be heard late at night as you're trying to sleep. Lanterns will be seen in the night walking around at the hands of unknown apparitions. It is basically a full ghost town of people who never deserved to die in the first place, all wanting to get a second just to feel their lives again as they were so unfairly ripped away from them. Definitely one of Canada's most horrific tragedies, and now home to one of its most haunted locations. Number 1 on this list is the Banff Springs Hotel. This hotel is located in Banff, Alberta, and is truly one of the creepiest places that I've ever read about. Now, first off, I want to note the hotel itself looks gorgeous on the outside. The beautiful nature it is surrounded by is stunning, and the hotel gives me some serious Harry Potter Hogwarts vibes. However, when I say that this place is surrounded by nature, I really mean it. It is totally out on its own, with no other buildings in sight at all. The secluded site has been around for 132 years and has housed its fair share of visitors. Some of these visitors have had some incredible stays. I mean, when you look it up online, the hotel has a 4.7 Google rating, so I mean, it's pretty freaking good. Some of the guests, though, they never checked out. In the 1920s, a couple was set to have their wedding at this hotel. On the day of the ceremony, though, The bride, while she was walking down one of the hotel's beautiful marble staircases, tripped and fell, smacking her head on her descent and dying on the spot. This bride's spirit is one of the most notable sightings people have had when they're staying at this hotel. It's said that they often see a phantom in a wedding dress ascending and descending the stairs very quickly. She's also been seen in the ballroom dancing alone, potentially dreaming of the dance that she wanted so desperately to have with the husband that she never got to marry. In 1975, a longtime bellman of the hotel, Sam, died there. Since then, sightings of Sam have been pretty consistent. One story details how two women lost their room key and called the front desk to go and get it. The front desk person sent someone to go and open their room for these ladies. When that person had got there though, the ladies were already in the room and said that another bellman had let them in. They described Sam to a T when they spoke about the bellman who helped them out. Instances like this have occurred time and time again at the hotel, with many people believing his spirit is still working there. Finally, with this hotel, you have room 873. Room 873 is rumored to be the home of a gruesome murder. One evening, a family was staying there and the father, for some unknown reason, lost his mind, murdering his family and himself. After completely refurbishing the room, the hotel put it back in service, but now people who have stayed there report hearing the screams and the cries as if they were still dying. If you have to stay at this hotel, definitely avoid room 873.
In at number 5 we have Berlin Citadel. The Citadel was built in 1559 and is known as one of the best preserved military structures in Europe. It was originally built to protect Spandau from attack, built specifically to have no blind spots, giving an advantage on all sides in the event of an attack. The Citadel has seen a lot of destruction and war since it was built, but the most famous ghost to live there is the spirit of Anna Sidow. Anna was married but had a love affair with Joachim II, the local ruler at the time. As the ruler was dying, he asked his son to take care of Anna. The affair had been frowned upon, but as both of their parents had passed, they had grown closer before he got sick. When he passed, his son didn't keep his promise. He immediately imprisoned her in the Citadel. No one ever saw Anna again after that. There was no explanation as to where she had gone or if she had been punished for her love affair with the ruler. There had been reports from visitors of the White Lady, a ghost seen walking around the Citadel late at night. Some felt a sudden cold breeze and feeling of dread while walking around the grounds, but still there was no explanation. Years later, the Citadel was a big tourist attraction and renovations took place. While they began to renovate, they found the remains of Anna. She had been walled into a cell and left there. This seemed to confirm the rumors that she was the White Lady for all these years. Some people have seen her late at night, but others have felt her presence. Even after she was found, her spirit had remained. If you visited today, you might catch a glimpse of her if you were to be there after nightfall. Coming in at number 4, we have Houska Castle. The origin of Houska goes back to the prehistoric times. A fort was built there in the 1st century AD. It sits on the edge of a lake covered in all sides by water, making it the perfect place if you're worried about intruders. The castle was built in the early 13th century by King Ottokar. It is not known when it was built, but the first written mention of the castle was in 1234, when it was owned by the King of Bohemia. It had many owners throughout the years, being seized in wars and passed to new rulers. It is now owned by the National Heritage Institute and is open to guests. It is regarded by locals as the creepiest place in Germany. Many refuse to visit or leave before it gets dark, as not to disturb the spirits they believe to live there. They believe that the castle is home to a dark supernatural entity. They believe it had been since prehistoric times and has never left the land. There are often voices heard from around the castle. Technical faults happen, often with no explanation. It's also been said many animals refuse to go into the building and act strange on the land outside the castle. There have been many times where the staff had lit candles to light up the halls when night falls. There have been times when every candle had been blown out at once, sending chills down the spines of anyone in the area. The most haunted part of the castle is the main tower. There are reports that if you sleep in the tower, you will pass away within the year. There are at least 2 confirmed cases of this happening throughout the castle's history. Coming in at number 3, Osnabrück. Osnabrück was once the site in a major pagan temple and burial area. The pagans decided that they would attempt to convert the German people to the Christian faith. This led to a massacre taking place at the temple. The local forces took the lives of those there, including the priests. They then desecrated the graves and broke their altar stones. The pagans built their temples and buried the dead on sacred land. It is believed that this act disturbed the deep magic infused in the land. Now, every year during the winter solstice and summer equinox, something strange happens on the land. Strange orbs of light have been seen moving around the area. Screams are heard from miles away. Stains appear on the stones that still lay there today. Although the town have now been built away from the graveyard, shroud you can still visit today. Many locals avoid the land as the spirits there seem angry about what happened to their descendants. It is thought these spirits wield great power and could have revenge when and if they choose to. If you do choose to visit, you need to be warned to be respectful. Do your research before and careful when you arrive. Many have reported seeing terrifying things or feelings like being watched while there. No one visits during the solstice and equinox as this is when the spirits are the most active. Coming in at number 2 we have Peacock Island. Peacock Island is situated in the River Havel in Berlin. In 1685, chemist Johann Kuhnel was given financial aid to build a glass foundry on the east of the island. Here he discovered how to produce artificial red glass. When he left the island in 1692, it remained unused for about 100 years until 1793. In 1793, the Prussian King Frederick built the castle for himself and his mistress. This was then passed down through the family and used for many different reasons, including being used as an exotic farm. Although the island has a long and exciting history, there are claims it is the original Johann Kuhnel who inhabits the island long after his death. It is claimed that Johann was not only into creating glass, but that he experimented with dark magic. It is believed that through his experiments with black magic, he had cursed himself. He attempted to flee the island as to not be attached to the curse, but this didn't work. In the afterlife, he was bound to the land and his old foundry. Those who have visited the island have seen a black figure with glowing red eyes. He is often seen at the stroke of midnight. When he is near, you can feel the chill in your bones. You know that you're in the presence of darkness just by being on the island during his hour. His laboratory still stands today, and some have tried to find his old lab to learn all the dark magic and secrets that he tried to hide. It is said a fire nearly destroyed the building. The police believe this to be man-made, and it's speculated he was trying to destroy the demons and spirits he had accidentally been working with in the lab. He couldn't escape the curse, and if you don't want to meet the same fate, I would avoid visiting this building. And finally, in at number 1 we have the Waldneil Hostert School. The school was first built in 1913 and then closed in 1937 when it was then used by the National Socialism Party. They wanted to use the building as part of their euthanasia program. They wanted to make their bloodlines pure and strong, and they had the idea to use the building to house anyone who was not seen as genetically healthy. All those with hereditary illnesses or who were severely mentally and physically handicapped were classified as lives unworthy of life. They would invite the people they deemed to fall into this category to live in the facility before they would eliminate them. According to data collected, more than 260,000 people fell victim to their war against sick. This was just one of many of these facilities run around Germany. With all of the horrible acts committed here, it is no surprise that it is haunted with the lost souls. The people lost here were taken suddenly, and their spirits remain unable to pass on. Some people who have visited reporting hearing blood-curdling cries coming up the walls in every direction. Others have seen shadows darting from room to room as though they are watching those who walk there. Other ghosts have been seen looking through the windows or sitting inside the rooms late at night. They don't seem to have bad intentions, but they seem to be distraught, which can be equally as dangerous if you were to stumble across them unknowingly. Some even claim to see children who have disappeared as soon as they were noticed. The stories from those who have visited are terrifying and chilling to hear. It is enough to warn anyone away from attempting to visit the old school. Coming in at 5, the Sultan's Palace. At 716 Dauphine Street in the French Quarter of New Orleans stands a 4-story home housing one of the most unusual yet terrifying ghosts, the Sultan. Built in 1836 by Jean-Baptiste Laprette, a plantation owner who rented out his city home when he was experiencing a shortage of cash. However, the man he rented it out to was a little odd. His name was Prince Suleiman, a Turk who claimed to be the Sultan of a Mid-Eastern country. He had many wives and family members as well as slaves and servants. Now things started to get a little weird when folks began reporting that not only did the Sultan's harem consist of many women but also young boys, with stories of orgies and kidnappings quickly surfacing. However, things took a truly gruesome turn when a passing neighbor made an early morning discovery. They noticed the house was particularly quiet and saw blood dripping from the gallery oozing out of the front door. He contacted the police, and what they found would haunt them forever. Body parts were strewn all over the house, which was also covered in blood. Women, children, and guards were slaughtered and beheaded. However, there was one body that had been left untouched. The Sultan. He had been buried alive with one hand reaching up through the dirt, almost as if he was trying to claw his way out. The identity of the murderer still remains a mystery to this day, and as of today, his angry spirit is said to roam the home, creating unusual noises, playing loud music, as well as making unwelcome advances on passing female residents. Coming in at 4, the Queen Mary, Long Beach, California. The RMS Queen Mary is a retired British ocean liner that sailed the North Atlantic Ocean between 1936 and 1967 for the Cunard White Star Line. She was built by John Brown and Company in Scotland along with RMS Queen Elizabeth, with the ships being built as a planned 2-ship weekly express service between Southampton and New York. However, with the outbreak of the Second World War, Queen Mary was converted into a troop ship and ferried Allied soldiers during the war. Following that, she was refitted as a passenger service before retiring completely in 1967, during which time she sailed from Southampton to the port of Long Beach, California, where she remains permanently moored. However, since that day, claims have been made that the ship is haunted, with Time magazine including it among its top 10 haunted places. According to some reports, one of the staterooms is alleged to be haunted by the spirit of a person murdered there, supposedly anyway. The Queen Mary also explicitly promotes suite room B340, which was a former third-class cabin, as, I quote, notoriously haunted. Many ghost tours take place in the ship, including Dark Harbour, which operates during Halloween. As it stands, up to 50 deaths have been logged on the Queen Mary, which truly makes her one of the most haunted ships in history. Coming in at 3, Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. Also known as ESP, this is a former American prison located in Pennsylvania and was operational from 1829 to 1971. America's most notorious criminals lived in these walls, including Al Capone and bank robber Willie Sutton. Initially designed by John Haviland, Eastern State is considered to be the world's first true penitentiary and was renowned for its revolutionary system of incarceration, also known as the Pennsylvania system, or separate system, which encouraged separate confinement for inmates as a form of rehabilitation. Inmates were housed in cells that could only be accessed by a small door that led to an equally as small exercise yard attached to the back of the prison. Rumour has it the doors were small so prisoners would have a harder time attempting to get out, thus minimising the chances of a guard getting attacked. While others have suggested the small doors forced prisoners to bow while entering or exiting their cells, which is related to penance and ties in with the religious inspiration of the prison. When an inmate would leave the cell, his head would be covered with a hood, so he couldn't see or be seen by others. However, by 1913, the penitentiary was forced to abandon its solitary system due to overcrowding, before closing its doors entirely in 1970. As of today, the penitentiary welcomes thousands of visitors yearly for both its museum and ghost tours, with some folks reporting paranormal happenings including disembodied laughter, shadowy figures, and pacing footsteps. Coming in at 2, St. Augustine Lighthouse, Florida. This lighthouse is a private aid to navigation and an active working lighthouse in Florida, and was built between 1871 and 1874. As it stands, nearly 225,000 people visit the lighthouse annually, due to its reputation for otherworldly visitors. The lighthouse has had many tragedies over the years, with one of its many ghosts rumoured to be that of a lighthouse keeper who fell to his death while painting the tower. Not only that, but 3 young girls also drowned when their cart they were playing on broke and fell into the ocean, with some visitors claiming to hear the sounds of children playing in and around the lighthouse. This haunted location has been featured in episodes of the sci-fi series Ghost Hunters, as well as My Ghost Story. However, researcher Joan Nickel, who investigated the lighthouse, has stated that there is no credible evidence the place is haunted, and instead noted that the spooky noises are just seagulls or even the wind. Party pooper. And finally, coming in at number 1, Leap Castle Island. Leap Castle, yep, it's pronounced Leap, is a castle located in Calgary County, Offaly Island. Now, there are varied accounts of when the castle came to be, with most sources pointing to the 13th century or even as late as the 15th century. Now, it was originally built by the O'Bannon clan before ruling was taken over by the O'Carroll clan. However, all was not well within the castle. Legend has it that during a struggle for power within the clan during the 1530s, one member plunged a sword into his brother, a priest, while he was holding mass in the castle chapel. The butchered priest fell across the altar and passed away in front of his family. The room is now formally known as the Bloody Chapel, with many witnesses claiming to have spotted the priest haunting the area at night. However, that's not all. The castle's history is incredibly macabre. During renovations in the early 1900s, a few workmen stumbled across a secret dungeon in the Bloody Chapel that was housing human skeletons that filled 3 cartloads when hauled away. The dungeon was designed in a way that prisoners would fall through a trapdoor and instantly have their lungs punctured by wooden spikes at the bottom, ultimately dying a slow and painful death. Many tourists have also spoken of a red lady who is reported to walk the halls at night holding a dagger. The castle has become notorious around the globe, with media flocking to capture its paranormal offerings, including ABC Family's Scariest Places on Earth and Living TV's Most Haunted.
Number 5 on this list is the Castle of Good Hope. This castle is located in South Africa and is on a lot of people's worldwide list of the most haunted spots. A main reason for this is simply how many ghosts reside at this place. It's one of the oldest buildings in Cape Town, and it was initially a fort built by the East India Trading Company. Today it houses the ghosts of Lady Anne Bernard, a soldier, and Governor Peter Gisbert van Noort. All of these ghosts have different origin stories and come from different times. Lady Anne Bernard was the first lady of this colony, and she died many years ago under some very mysterious circumstances. Her ghost is said to frequent this spot and will make herself known to visitors. The soldier in question apparently hung himself in the bell tower many years ago as well. This tower has been reported to ring itself with nobody near it at all, and many think that it's the ghost of this soldier that's responsible. And the last is the governor. And this was apparently a very cruel man who would send soldiers to the gallows for his own sick amusement. Apparently one soldier, before being killed, put a curse on him, and after the soldier died, the governor was found dead in his own office of a heart attack. Now his ghost forever wanders the castle in search of rest. Apparently the modern day soldiers that have to patrol this place don't even walk through it at nighttime, but they walk around it for fear of these poltergeists. Not a spot that I'd recommend visiting if you ever find yourself in South Africa. Number 4 on this list is Table Mountain. Table Mountain is located in Cape Town as well, and is a large and intimidating mountain that overlooks the city. Travel Triangle says, no matter how brave-hearted you are, you would surely get the scariest of experiences of your life here. It's believed that the governor of Cape Town had an enemy among one of the citizens of this town. In order to take revenge, he gifted the son of the governor a beautiful flute. Unbeknownst of the fact that it was used by a leprosy earlier, the boy enjoyed playing it. After playing it for a few days, he became so ill that he was forced for expulsion at a hut in the Table Mountain. He played his flute there until he died. The local people of the area say that the mournful tunes of flute are still heard in the dark, lonely forest. The story doesn't go on to say what happened to the man who gifted this child with the flute, but one can only assume that the governor had something to say about it. The story itself is really sad though, and watched as an innocent was killed. It makes sense why their ghost would still haunt this mountain today. Also, who knows what happened in those last final days of life in the hut on the mountain. Potentially it was something paranormal, which has led to the continued haunting. Number 3 on this list is Baron Empain's Palace. So this palace is located in Egypt and is apparently one of the most haunted. Usually when we think about haunted spots in Egypt, we think about the pyramids. And truthfully, they should probably make this list as well. But today I wanted to pivot and shine some light onto this place, which is arguably just as cursed. Travel Triangle once again writes, people nearby and guards around the palace have seen ghosts and have heard weird voices coming out of this now abandoned place. It's believed that Baron, owner of this house, used to live here with his wife, daughter, and other family members. Baron's wife died in this palace in very mysterious circumstances. It's also believed that his wife was unhappy with Baron due to his extramarital relationships. This made the daughter undergo severe pain and depression, and after a few months, she also passed away under mysterious circumstances. Baron died, and people aren't sure exactly how he died either. Due to the jinxed and haunted experiences the other relatives had long left the palace. This site has been very popular among ghost finders and Egyptian tantrics, but after the haunted experiences increased, the palace has been shut down for visitors, although one can roam around the exteriors of this place. This is among the spookiest haunted places in Egypt. Whenever 3 people die just unexpectedly like that with mysterious circumstances, there's always bound to be a legend around it. The fact that so many visitors and guards have seen evidence of potential poltergeists though, kinda really leads me to believe that something must be up with this place. Some of the stories are conflicting though about what ghostly apparitions are really out and about. Some accounts have talked about Baron himself walking around this place, whereas others have told tale of a mysterious ghost that isn't really connected to the family by blood. This ghost is thought to be of somebody who worked worked for Baron and was actually killed in this place. This ghost then came back to haunt the family, and it's what caused their unexpected deaths in the first place. It's really too bad that it has to be this way too, because the palace itself is beautiful on the outside, and I imagine that the inside is just as nice. Still not worth the risk of visiting though, considering its current ghostly inhabitant. Number 2 on this list is Cape Coast Castle. This castle is located in Ghana, and some horrible tragedies occurred here over the years. Originally, this castle was built so that people could trade gold and other valuable items. As time went on though, its purpose became far more evil. Slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was truly a horrible time in human history, a time filled with so many injustices and atrocities. Basically, human beings were treated as animals and sold to the wealthy buyers in North America. The slaves that were sold would often come from these African countries like Ghana. Cape Coast Castle was used as a place to keep these people before the ship would come from North America to pick them up. It's said that the ship would come roughly once every 6 months, and conditions at this castle, they were horrible. They would take these people, separate the women from the men, and chain all of them up, leaving them in the dungeon. The only time the door would open up would be when the ships arrived to take them to North America, where their conditions would obviously not improve. During this time, many people passed away from the atrocious conditions that they were held in. Malnourishment and disease claimed the lives of so many people. Even death wouldn't cause the door to open though. Those who remained alive would have to sit in this room with the corpse of the person right next to them. It's no wonder that from all of this, people have talked about this place being haunted. The biggest sensation that everyone says is just a horrible sense of dread and fear. Granted, even if there isn't any ghostly presence here, I still think that I'd feel that. Just being around a place that's seen so much horror is bound to make somebody feel scared. And finally, number 1 on this list is Menengai Crater. This crater has a lot of ancient legends surrounding it and is located deep in Kenya. Eddie Mwanza writes, "The extinct volcano offers striking views of Lake Nakuru and Lake Bogoria. Although the volcano is dormant, there are hot spots on the floor of the crater where steam jets sometimes fill it with vapor. However, its stunning beauty is matched by its dark and wild side that has locals convinced to be the work of evil spirits. People have lost their lives while others have disappeared, never to be seen from again, while others have strayed and lost direction in the cave, only for them to be found hours later unable to explain how they lost their way. This has earned the crater the name Kirma Kia Ngoma, which means the place of devils in Kikuyu. There are also mythical and unsupported claims of some people seeing the devil riding a motorcycle. There's also widespread allegation of a flying umbrella that normally appears whenever it rains. Historians say the place was a scene of violent battles between the Lakapia Messiah, who did not recognize the authority of the Laban, the spiritual leader of the Messiah, against Ilpu Masi. In one battle, it's said that Lakapia warriors were thrown into the caldera, with local folklore claiming that the spirits of the warriors haunt the place to date. So this place is obviously a freaking hazard, guys, with potential soldier ghosts chilling in its depths, and also many stories of people getting totally lost and never seen from again. It's no wonder locals are constantly worried about this crater. I was also looking at pictures of this place, and geographically it looks like a major hazard as well. It's out in the complete middle of nowhere and looks extremely hard to traverse. As cool as the scenery would be, going here just really isn't the best idea. Number 5 on this list is Pine Gap. Pine Gap is a massive military base that's hid away in the Australian outback, completely away from the public's view. It's jointly run and occupied by the American and Australian governments. The airspace over top of it is a complete no-fly zone, and the complex itself is obviously very locked off. Many of the locals have come to speak of this place as Area 51 of Australia. Now, unlike Area 51, this place hasn't been linked to aliens. It's actually been linked to a super secret, super high-tech surveillance system. At this point, it kind of feels like common knowledge that the government is occasionally peeking in on our conversations. Well, Pine Gap in Australia may be the spot that most of that happens at. Echelon was the codename given to a massive signals intelligence collection device. It's believed that this location in Australia collects this information and stores it there. Think about that. A massive site out in the middle of the outback with all of our info stored on a massive hard drives at somebody's fingertips. With over 800 people apparently employed at this base, there are 800 several individuals that know more about you than I think any of us would like. Your entire communications history is just waiting there to be revealed to the public. It's no wonder that this place isn't talked about too much, because think about how damaging it could be if that info was leaked to the public or somebody got a hold of it. The amount of secrets that could be discovered by spending an hour or two at that place is honestly difficult to comprehend. Number 4 on this list is Amchitka Island. Amchitka Island is a volcanic island that's part of the Aleutian Islands. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Aleutian Islands are a grouping of islands off of the coast of Alaska that stretch into the Pacific Ocean. Now this place is really interesting because by all accounts, hardly anybody lives there at all. In fact, it's possible that there are no permanent residents there whatsoever. Or that's just what the government wants us to think. Tons of areas on this island just simply can't be found on Google Earth. This would probably go completely unnoticed if it wasn't for the fact that the Americans used this place as a spot for nuclear testing several decades ago. From the 50s to the 70s, this was a spot used by the American government to test out their weapons. Obviously, you don't really want the world knowing about this or seeing your capabilities, so keeping it a secret would be important. This apparently ceased in the 70s, but then it begs the question, why is it blotted out on Google Earth? Why are there sections of this island that the world can't see? Starts to make you think that maybe this isn't just an innocent Aleutian Island in the Pacific Ocean, but actually a spot that never stopped testing weapons. Or if they did stop testing them, then maybe this is where they're developing them now. If I'm about to do something shady, then an island in the middle of nowhere with no permanent residents would certainly be my spot of choice. It's very possible that the American government feels the same way. Number 3 on this list is Harvey Point Defense Testing Activity Facility. This site is located in North Carolina and is definitely something that the government doesn't like to advertise. Ever wonder where the elites of the elite train? Like the super secret, super advanced soldiers that only come out for the crazy covert missions? Well, this is that place. Wikipedia writes, specialty military air operations are located at this facility as the installation has 2 usable landing fields and plans for a 3rd. The FAA Charlotte Sectional Aeronautical Chart identifies this area as special use airspace R5301, which is continuously restricted from general aviation traffic from the surface of an altitude of 14,000 feet above mean sea level. Areas of Albermay Sound adjacent to the facility are also under restricted airspace R5302, which is under the operational authority of Giant Killer, or whichever ATC has controlling authority over the airspace at that time. Harvey Point is also used for CIA paramilitary and counterterrorism courses that involve high explosives and ballistics. The explosives are used to simulate terrorist bombs and can be heard for miles in the surrounding communities. It was also used by DevGru to train for the raid that killed Osama bin Laden in a scale mock-up of his secret compound. Pretty much all of the super elite military governmental stuff is going down at this spot. The team that took out Osama bin Laden trained here. Like, it really doesn't get more secret and advanced than that. Also, there have been a ton of rumors about the types of weapons that are being developed here too. Incredibly advanced aircraft that will have capabilities hard for us to even understand are apparently being built here. The advancements may not just stop with equipment either, but may even go further to people as well. Obviously, Iron Man and Captain America are superheroes and they aren't real, but if there ever was a site where the government was to be experimenting with things like that, then this would be it. Either incredibly advanced war bodysuits or literally making superhumans, then this could be the place where all that goes down. Number 2 on this list is Jeannette Island. Jeannette Island is located in the East Siberian Sea and belongs to the Russians. This island is shrouded in mystery though for the history it has had with Google Earth. Similarly to our other creepy Alaskan island, when you go on to Google Earth, you can't actually see anything here. In fact, for a while, all you could see was a black blob where an island should be, and then more recently it was changed so that there's literally no landmass here at all. The Sun writes, it's not clear why the island is blurred, although there have been issues around whether the territory belongs to Russia or the USA. Some conspiracy theorists have suggested the spot is an ideal location for a secret Russian military base as it's relatively close to the US and Canada. Google often blocks out military locations on its Maps tool, including air bases in Germany, missile silos in Russia, and bases in Afghanistan. Images of the island were provided to Google by the International Bathymetric Chart of the Arctic Ocean, a project to map the Arctic Ocean initiated in St. Petersburg, Russia. This Russian military base thing has definitely been gaining some traction. As the Sun said, this base would be pretty close to North America, which is something Russia would definitely want. It's also super secluded and the perfect spot to be conducting some really questionable experiments or projects that you don't want prying eyes of the world to see. When Google was inevitably asked about why they don't have a picture for this, the spokesperson for them declined to comment. And number 1 on this list is Znamensk. This is a Russian city and one that's largely been kept off the radar since its birth because it's something that the Russian government doesn't want anyone to know about. Passport Symphony says, Znamensk was founded in 1948 as a missile test range facility under the name of Caspian Yar. Multiple launches of test rockets and satellites were carried out at this site throughout the years. Eventually, Caspian Yar became a cosmodrome in 1966, and like the other cities on this list, it wasn't shown on the map until the 1990s. There are many things that make Znamensk the most mysterious city in Russia, and one of them is a UFO crashing that happened in the 1950s. Some even argue that this incident allowed the Russians to design Sputnik and achieve an early lead in the space race. This story was kept secret and only recently became known to the media. This made Caspian Yar known as the Russian Roswell. However, note that this isn't the only mystery that happened at Znamensk, but rather the only one that made it public. The site's function was interrupted after the fall of the Soviet Union, but it began working again in 1998. We got missile launches, we got weapon development, UFO landings. It's no wonder that the Russians don't want anybody catching on to this place. The fact that it was literally around for almost 50 years before it even appeared on a map is super questionable as well. What the heck was going on at this place for 50 years that was so secretive that they couldn't have anyone even knowing about its existence? One has to think that this place is similar to Area 51 in America. I personally wouldn't be surprised if Russia's still using this as a spot to do some really scary and probably pretty questionable experiments without anybody knowing. Those could involve aliens, genetic mutations, maybe even advanced weaponry development. It's hard to say truly what's going on at this place, and it's likely that Russia kinda wants to keep it that way.